To me, it's very clear. If you want to be successful in retailing 2025 as a CPG brand, the journey passes obviously through your click and collect. We've already discussed it. You've got to know how to sell 3P on Amazon. Mark my words, 3P. I didn't say 1P. And D2C.
Welcome to eCommerce Deep Dive, a podcast featuring the biggest players in retail and e-commerce. Your host is John Ghiorso, founder and CEO of Orca Pacific. Today, John is joined by Sri Rajagopalan, a CPG industry expert and former VP at Revlon, Johnson & Johnson, and PepsiCo. Sri shares his brutally honest advice for CPG brands looking to succeed in the digital age. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show.
Sri, welcome to the show.
John, how's it going, man? Thanks for having me, first of all, on the show. It was a pleasure to have you on the show a few weeks back and take a deep dive down into Amazon, which is the 2020 and 2021 Hot Topic Retailer of the Years. So can't wait to get started here.
Indeed, it is. For those of our audience that kind of don't already know you, Sri, or don't listen to your show, it'd be great just to hear a little bit of background on you and kind of your experience in the industry and what you're up to today.
You bet, John. So been in CPG 24 years, got out of school at Virginia Tech. Hockey football is actually doing well this year, 4-2. We just won our last game, 42-35. So I'm actually happy after dropping one to Wake Forest 16-23. But Hendon Hooker is a great quarterback. So got out of school, worked for IRI, which is a market research firm, for a few years. Was on site at PepsiCo, VP of sales there, brought me on to be on the selling side. I spent about a decade long with PepsiCo, and not only did they rotate me in functions such as business intelligence, customer insights, consumer insights, and then on the selling side at Frito-Lay, the dollar drug and convenience channel, where I had a chance to do things like lead JBPs, the joint business plans with customers. I was in the field a heck of a lot, actually sitting with customers and developing the annual operating plan. And then one day I got asked to get going with ecom. So this is about a 8 or 9, close to 10-year journey now in digital selling. And what started as let's get a strategy going for Frito-Lay led to let's scale it from a small $5 million largely distributor-led business for Johnson & Johnson's consumer sector to then coaching pharma and med devices into it. At some point, looking at the transformation of healthcare with digital right at the center, the patient being a whole lot more digital. I don't even like the word patient. I think of them all as consumers at the end of the day. And that led to Revlon, Elizabeth Arden, and here I am, my supplements brand, which is called Zenfuel. That's what it looks like for those who are actually watching the video. Sleep, stress and anxiety relief, pain relief, and then all day energy, and then male sexual wellness and performance. And I also sit in a few boards of startups. I think life's mission now, besides running a podcast and being, we have our own entertainment indie record label called Mischief Records. And life's mission now is to help smaller brands really compete in CPG and scale up to be bigger brands. Because I've felt for the last 8 or 9 years, having touched many big brands myself, and now being a small brand entrepreneur, that digital selling and the whole digital ecosystem of CPG is the playground of the income and of the startup, and is the huge Achilles heel of the large brand. So much so to the extent I throw around a phrase all the time, John, which is D2C is the kryptonite of large brands. But that's me in a nutshell.
So, I don't disagree with that. Why is that? I mean, is there a fundamental kind of...
Yeah, there is.
Like, obviously these brands have lots of capital. They have lots of really smart, hardworking people. What...
Yes. It's pretty straightforward, actually, John. Something I've experienced in my own life. So I can't claim to be the most proficient e-commerce person on earth, but I've had the fortune and the blessing of many mentors guiding me in this journey, and chief sales officers kind of giving me leadership roles. And my humble learning here is most scaled brands in the United States or globally were made for warehouse-based distribution, which means you create truckloads of quantities and then you ship them over to another third party, which completes the sale with the consumer, aka retail. So your whole muscle power and your skill set is built around branding. It's not built around distribution, merchandising, or retailing. And the moment you get to e-commerce, you could be selling on Amazon even in the 1P business model, or Walmart where it's walmart.com and click and collect. The difference between everyday brick and mortar selling and retailing and online retailing and selling is, I think the job of a salesperson or a commercial person is both marketing and selling. And the way CPG companies have created ecosystems of eliteness is either you're a brand marketer or you're a commercial salesperson, and the twain shall never meet. And I think that is a massive weakness, the inability to totally conquer retailing.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, fundamentally, most of these companies in their DNA are really B2B companies, right? I mean, they're shipping very large quantities of product to another very large business, a retailer, and obviously they have some impact on the consumer. The biggest impact, I agree, is kind of on the pull through from the brand side, but they're not touching the customer in the way that you are kind of minute by minute with e-commerce. So,
But John, one
yeah,
thing
go
comes to
ahead.
mind with that, right? When you don't touch the customer every day, you do distance yourself from the shopper to an extent where you go into this ecosystem where you lose agility. Customers require you to transform, improve, and optimize every single day. That's what retailers do. They know every single customer, how often they shop, what's in the cart, why they didn't shop, why there's cart abandonment, what price points they like, due to which they're highly agile. Every week, there's promos across hundreds and thousands of SKUs. Brands have become so distant from the actual customer that they build these long, year-long annual operating plans to make a left turn and switch. And this pandemic that in 2020 that we went through was a little bit of a shock for most brands. Unless they were already doing well on Amazon, this was a little bit of a shock because they didn't have the search strategy in place for retail media. The content at best was average in terms of being SEO. I can't even say it's SEO optimized. It's written for prettiness and visual appeal versus SEO. And the business of ecom is SEO. The assortment is whatever I sell in store, let me just sell everything online. And what kind of strategy is that? And then navigation user experience is not even questioned because it's owned by the retailer. And then ratings and reviews is your public discussion. Most people syndicate everything from their website using one of the many service providers that exist. So to me, all of this was a rude shock for brands in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, that's that. I mean, I agree with all that. Maybe kind of upstream of that, you have this structural issue,
Yep.
which is very much an outcome of the way the industry was set up and still is set up with a lot
Absolutely.
of traditional retailers. But I think again, plenty of smart people that know there's a problem here, there's something to overcome. What are, and we don't have to name names, but when you think of kind of the big CPGs that are getting with the program, that are doing what they need to do, what changes are they making internally to kind of overcome this inherent structural problem?
Number one, John, the successful brands, what they did is they didn't hold back the size of the business in dollars as a reason to why they will go deep or not into ecom. For example, in a $1 billion sales company, if ecom direct sales from ecom was only 20 million, they didn't say, oh, this is like a fractional 0.2%, so I'm not really going to care. They took the time to understand there's something coming out in the future, which these numbers are going to explode, which is exactly what's happened in 2020. But they focus more on the capability side. They started thinking about, oh my gosh, products the way they were found yesterday was circulars, in-store walkthroughs. The way products are found today is on a search bar at a given retailer on Google. And they're like, let's beef up our search. That means instead of investing in shopper marketing in store to build the end cap, let's also invest in a solid SEM strategy that's multi-pronged, not just Google. Let's even have adult conversations with retailers about participating in Google PDAs. I mean, sophisticated brands do that today. Then they started saying content. Let's write content with the lens of the consumer based on what they search for, need states, efficacies, time of day, subcategories, as opposed to I want to tell the story of a brand to look really visually appealing and exactly what I built it for to match my P&L. They've overcome that battle. Assortment, they don't literally pluck everything that's sold in store and just throw it on Amazon or throw it on D2C and then create a price point and brand equity havoc. They actually have a well laid out strategy. What am I going to sell? Where am I going to sell? How often? How many discount? They balance it, and then user experience, they understand the role of their website is education. So easy to navigate website, whatever you want to know about the brand. It's they allow two-way communication via social media. You can ask any question such as ingredients, where things are sourced from, how it's manufactured, all the way to efficacy of the product that's actually handed to the consumer when they purchase the product, down to they take ratings and reviews as a two-way conversation about the brand. They just don't take it as it's a verdict on am I good or bad. They actually use it as a platform to respond, such as answering questions on ratings and reviews or looking at a review that may not be the most flattering and try to get to the bottom of it. And I think the good brands are were doing this. The catch up between the incumbents and the startups started happening about 3 or 4 years ago. The good brands have moved in that direction. My humble message to those listening is all the small brands which have enjoyed 10 years of kind of unfiltered territory here where large brands didn't compete, watch out, because the large brands now in 2020 has said a big problem's gotten solved, John, which is it's no longer 0.2% of the sales. Now it's closer to like 20, maybe even depending on the category, it could be 40 at this moment. And they're like, they've got deep pockets, which small brands don't have. And they're making amazing switches, such as rewriting their media mix to include retail media, which means all of a sudden those SEM dollars on 1P on Amazon, boom. John, in some ways, your job is going to get harder because you're helping people like me who are in the 3P world with Seller Central be successful. So we'll just have to take that next giant leap step together on how we navigate Seller Central with the next set of creative strategies.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's a kind of constantly evolving world. I think that makes sense though that I mean maybe everyone in CPG has been forced into the future this year. Like this was the year that we kind of was supposed to happen in 5 years, and it happened this year instead.
Yep.
So everyone got rudely awakened to what the future looks like. But I still think kind of maybe another way to interpret at a high level what you're saying is these CPGs that really built for the future versus built for kind of next quarter or the present were really the ones that were succeeding. You mentioned this.
John, I don't want to name names, but to be very fair, it's a very minor handful and it fits in a handful.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not a basket and it's not an explosive set of numbers here.
yeah, yeah. We've kind of I would say we've experienced the same thing. You mentioned this disconnect between sales and marketing advertising, which we can be a little more specific, I guess, than that. But this is something that seems maybe kind of like theoretical, and oh well, yeah, sure, you should have teams work together, and that's an interesting business problem. But when we get into now allocating media dollars on Amazon, and you have two completely separate parts of an organization that are spending money on the same platform with the same software, with the same agency, doing the same stuff, that becomes a real world issue you have to solve.
Yep.
Have in your experience solving that issue, which I know from the sort of practical side up is an issue, from an internal kind of org structure, are there any like kind of case studies or good examples of the way this has been dealt with?
Strongly recommend, John, to follow up with the Johnson and Johnson consumer example. The way we did it back in 2016-17 is the team and I would actually go to our agency in New York, sit with them for hours and hours and hours, understand the brand mission, the brand purpose, the efficacy of every single SKU down to item level. And we decided early on that if we're going to be successful, we salespeople are going to have to understand and embrace every aspect of the brand and not fight it. And the brand teams came on board and understood that if they're going to be successful in this digital journey, storytelling alone is not enough. You have to storytell from a merchandising perspective, which brands do not have that skill set. They don't teach merchandising in marketing 5104 essentials of marketing, or it doesn't exist in Philip Kotler's book, which still, by the way, gets used in MBA programs 30 years later. So we've already got a problem in how we're defining marketing. So we went down the path of we're gonna hold hands, and salespeople are gonna become 40-50% marketers, and marketers are gonna become 50% salespeople. What's the outcome of that? We were probably one of the few commercial selling teams that exist in North America, which invited our brand folks to come with us to an Amazon, to a Walmart.com meeting. And similarly, D2C, we salespeople took a deep interest on how the story's told. So when we started building AOPs with annual operating plans with Amazon, by the way, if anyone says you can't build it, that's hogwash. You can. You just have to seek it. Or similarly, you can even build a strap plan with Amazon, a 3-year plan if you seek it again. Um, so we started actually bringing these conversations into those plans, and we invited brand people to sit in the room with the retailer. And that was an eye-opening moment for them because no other sales team, especially on the brick and mortar side, ever would let a brand marketer other than just a CMO come to a very high level, quote unquote, top to top marketing. So it was a big win for marketers to understand the merchandising side. It was a big win for the sales folks to really have a brand person in the room, tell the story, and all of a sudden the retailer would give us ideas and say, "Oh my gosh, that's the story you want to communicate. I always thought it's blah. Why don't we meet somewhere in between? This sounds like exactly what the consumer wants. This is how we're going to do it." All of a sudden, we're creating new images that are SEO optimized when they come out of Salsify. The bullet points for the content are SEO optimized, written in the lens of the consumer, who actually is the one that really puts all our paychecks in the mail at the end of the day. And it became such a great working model that we ended up working with FASB, the Financial Accounting Board of New York, the auditor for J&J, Priceward, PwC, to kind of really define down to the depths who pays for retail media. Because logically, the off the bat thinking knee-jerk reaction is the retailer receives the check, so pay for it from trade. And if you pay for it from trade, you're holding back consumer promotions and discounts. How's it fair to the consumer? It really belonged in the marketing mix, with a huge part of that being marketers need to own the result of this. And that's what we did at J&J, and it's paying dividends. I have so many friends at J&J, even though I decided to move on to other things in my life. It's paying dividends even today. And if I look at Unilever, if I look at P&G, these two are shining beacons of the same example.
Hey there, I'm Dave Zimmerman with Orca Pacific. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to let you know this episode is brought to you by Orca Pacific, a Mighty Hive company. We're a full-service agency exclusively focused on Amazon with capabilities for everything a brand needs to succeed on the platform. From advertising strategy, content development and SEO, to merchandising and marketing. If it relates to driving and converting demand on the platform, our dedicated teams are leaders in this space. Our robust suite of services includes expertise on the back end as well, from operational support, demand forecasting and planning, to the right fulfillment options, and higher level strategies like long-term planning, channel management, and access to beta programs. To learn more, visit our website at www.orcapac.com. That's ORCAPAC.com. And a business development manager will get you up to speed on how we can accelerate your Amazon business. Now, back to the show.
You know, I think one of the big challenges in CPG with e-commerce is still profitability, and not just lack of profitability, but the framing, the KPIs, the way that profitability is viewed both on a short-term and a long-term basis. What are kind of same question around profitability? What are brands doing well? What are they getting wrong? Are there structural issues? Like what's working, what's not?
The most important thing to remember, John, and really have an adult conversation about is the entire CPG business model of brands was built for scaled truckloads of supply chain to hand it off to the retailer and not incur any of the cost of retailing. All of a sudden, if you're getting into the retailing world and you're putting a capital investment to do it, it's not rocket science that the P&L ecosystem will look different. But because brands have been measured forever on a brand P&L, and now they're trying to act like they're a retailer, obviously the P&Ls are never going to match, and it's going to feel artificially, oh my God, we just eroded profitability. But make no mistake, John, the future of brands is retailing. Doesn't mean you have to be in D2C yourself. That's a portion of your ecosystem. The road to success in digital storytelling passes through D2C and Amazon. If you haven't conquered those two, you're missing a huge part of the bus. But that doesn't mean you don't muscle up on Walmart.coms, etc. So back on profitability, you have to be able to accept there is going to be a variance. Just because your old model was built a certain way, you can't force. It's like force fitting, the square peg in a round hole, and it's never going to work. And you can complain and complain and complain, and then take a electric saw and try to get all your shapes right and force fit every. That's what's happened in the last 5 years of the industry. So what I encourage brands to do, and I also encourage service providers to do, is have the adult conversation of profitability piecemeal. There are pieces in a P&L. The first is you got to get your trade rate right. This is your gross sales, trade rate, net sales. If you can't fix your gross to net because you have way too many chargebacks with your retailers, because the KPIs that you're measured to in the chargebacks in brick and mortar, you've already optimized them. In ecom, you're barely getting warmed up. So already the gap is going to be significant, such as your vendor lead times are going to be radically different for ecom. Storage fees are going to be radically different. Your penalties for missing an appointment are going to be radically different. If you don't take time to understand where that money is going, you've already lost the battle. Now, let's say you fix the trade part of it. Then you get into the world of, I would call the next one is media and all the investments surrounding search, content, SEO, ratings and reviews, social media. You got to absolutely nail that. And the step one of the journey is, if you're afraid to ask the question and answer who's going to write the check for media, give up on this journey. It belongs in the marketing mix, it doesn't belong in trade. And if you can't fix that problem like adults in a room, this journey is not going to move. But once, let's say, you get that agreement, it's part of the marketing mix, you have to bring to ecom the same discipline you bring to your brick and mortar advertising, which means when you build the mix, your consumer cohorts, demographics inform how much you're going to allocate towards an Amazon or a D2C or a Walmart.com or a CVS.com or the various grocers.com that you sell. You have to build partnerships with the WMGs, the Roundels, the AMGs of the world, and you have to understand the KPIs. Everyone loves to manage for ACOS on Amazon. I'm like, it's the last thing I'm going to care about in my own personal journey of Zenfuel, because the storytelling doesn't come free. It's a lot of effort. But once the storytelling is done, very few people ask the question. They're like, how many impressions did I get? Because that's the KPI for offline selling. In the world of online selling, great, you can get 1 million impressions. You can even have an amazing click through rate, and you got zero conversions. So you have to be adult enough to realize, why didn't I get my conversion? Oh gosh, my PDP sucks. I don't have the right images. And so then you start looking at the supply chain on your P&L, your profit equation, and you say, all that investment I've made in the packaging, the physical, tangible packaging, it's useless online. I have to recreate that in a 3D format online, which is, in my world, that's front of bottle, back of bottle, ingredients, claims, the actual box on its own, the entire story. Create the lifestyle version of it, videos. So you have to have this adult thinking that, okay, that is packaging. Then the question pops up. If you look at who owns packaging in the offline world, it's owned by R&D. It's storytelling. It has to be owned by marketing, with salespeople having an influence, because the storytelling on Amazon, because the hashtags and the searches you do on Amazon are not the same as Walmart, which means now you need some variations. And so that's going to impact your profit model. So I think of the entire spectrum. And I can still tell you, John, that when we worked this at J&J, it took us a couple of years. But in a couple of years, when we apples to apples looked at our North America P&L at the customer level and we looked at Amazon, we were neutral. So we figured it out. And the way you get there, John, is responsibilities have to lie in the right places, such as if packaging is owned by R&D, you don't get an excuse for why the digital shelf is not owned by R&D, which means right when R&D is creating a new product, not only do they focus on what price they acquire reams of cardboard for creating a box for, they focus on, can I now work with the agency on having the best quality images? That's how you fix this problem. How many brands do you think are doing this at that grassroots level?
I love the way you walk through that. I think one of the higher level takeaways for me, and it's certainly something I believe, but I think this kind of mini case study you went through is really instructive. I think so many CPG brands look at e-commerce and they say, this is going to be a less profitable channel, but it's a channel that we sort of have to win in because it's just where the consumer's going. So we're just going to have to sort of like eat that and deal with it and just like, try to kind of shift as much as we can get away with there. And what you're saying, which I totally agree with, is that it is less profitable when you're not optimized for that channel. If you've been in brick and mortar for 50 years and you've built your entire business optimizing that channel, it's going to be really efficient, which means it's going to be more profitable. If you're taking e-commerce seriously for all of 18 months and you haven't done the work to optimize everything you just explained for that channel, of course it's going to be less profitable.
John, I want to give you another simple example. Let's get into the wonderful world of premium fragrances. Fragrances, premium, I'm going to be very generous and say over $40.
Sure.
To get a slot in an offline world in 700 stores, let's say, of a given retailer, costs you millions to keep them in the slot, the displays you walk by. You decide to sell them on D2C. Your shipping cost and your test little sachets that you make, little plastic things you make to supply them free to the consumer universe will be cheaper. You can actually make more money with D2C. You can be more profitable, which when I say this publicly, people are like, dude, what are you thinking? D2C is more profitable. You can actually improve profitability depending on the subcategory you're in, but we've got this mental block.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I mean, that's, back to our conversation about these kind of digitally native brands being more successful. They're not more successful just because they're inherently more profitable, but they are usually more profitable as well, mostly because they've built their entire business digital first. They didn't have to kind of reconfigure everything, from having a legacy 30, 40-year business. Not to bag on the big CPG guys. It's where they were, but it's
reality, John. It's okay. We are not bagging on anybody. The time has come in the industry to be 100% brutally honest. Your and my responsibility as we have this conversation is to be 100% brutally honest so we can participate in the positive transformation in this industry. Because what do we want to see at the end of the day? We want to see quality products at value for the consumer.
Well said. Very, very well said. What else? What else stands out to you from a big CPG perspective? 2020, obviously, we all know the story of COVID and what that's done.
Yep.
We're very close to the end of the year. Obviously, we're right kind of in the middle of Q4. But when you look to next year, where's the industry going? What's going to separate the winners from losers?
Let's break it up in two pieces, right? I'll call it the incumbents, larger brands, and then the digital natives. Or smaller brands, which inherently digital is just kind of tattooed into the ecosystem. Incumbents and larger brands, John, they think of this as, I haven't done what I needed to for the last 5 years. They're either going to say, A, COVID has created a permanent trajectory upwards. It's not the 50% purchasing that's taking place. It's not the 4%. It's going to be 25. I got to pay attention. And they're going to chase it. But the problem when they chase it is they think of it as a sprint. I need to do this in 1 quarter. I need to find the leader that fits my narrative as opposed to the digital kind of evangelist who can come in and change the narrative. Because when you take somebody and you bring them in and say, write the digital journey for me, and you force them to conform to your offline standards of being in, oh, I missed that one, John, was something we should talk about. Succeeding in digital, you have to have an amazing external focus. You got to go to conferences. You got to do what we're doing now. Talk to people, be open to learning, reading articles, being on LinkedIn and learning from others, passing on the wisdom of what you've learned on to others. Most brands are extremely internally focused for the simple reason that their strength was built through branding internally and the secrets were kept internally of that. The equity was built that way. And so large brands by inherent nature will struggle even in 2021, because they usually, what we see is these amazing digital leaders, ex Amazon as a simple example. They could be anybody, ex whatever. They come on board and then they run into this brick wall of a cultural situation, and then they leave. And then you're back to square one. It's because of that internal external issue. But back to what we were discussing, you're either going to say, yes, I'm going to do it, and then you're going to treat it like a sprint, and you're going to realize very quickly this is not a sprint, this is a marathon. Or B, you're going to treat it like a marathon. You're going to put some capital investment. You are going to get into D2C, and you're going to get very curious. And D2C doesn't mean you're going to take the 4,000 SKUs you sell at a Walmart and you're going to put it on D2C. You're going to be very purposeful. It's about data. It's about the consumer. It's about testing your new product launches. I actually believe, John, call me crazy, we're one NACDS away, which is the conference for brick and mortar top to tops, like the 1 hour shotgun sessions to agree on the innovation plan for next year. We're one NACDS away whenever the in-person happens, maybe 2022, of retailers asking brands, why should I take your product and bring it in store and give you digital space? Have you tested it? What data do you have? The only mechanism one has is D2C, or testing it via 3P on Amazon. You can pretend that you're in the D2C world by doing that too. And to me, this is going to happen. That's A. B is, you're going to say hogwash. This is all COVID. Life's can as soon as the vaccine is out of, yeah, exactly. So everyone's going to run back in store and hug each other like they missed each other for centuries and decades. And then my answer to you is good, because the smaller digital natives, we're going to have much more longer fun marathon play territory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure, sure. Yeah, I that option B, I think is.
I'm sure you've heard it
nice.
from enough people, John. I can't be the
Yeah.
first one telling you this.
Yeah, to me, that's like the taxi cab companies sitting around going, this Uber thing, I don't know, they're all going to come back pretty soon, right? Like this Uber thing is overhyped.
$3.25 if you don't return your video cassette in 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the brick and mortar guys, I think there's some really interesting things they're doing. There's all these kind of hybrid omni-channel options. They're not going anywhere. They're going to innovate, but e-commerce is not going to slow down.
We should talk about that for 1 second, right? So if I thought about what is the best bet for large brands, where do you put your attention? Where do you put your head? Where can you run this as a sprint versus running the marathon? Your best bet to run a sprint, which is what you're built for, quick results versus quick effort, is your brick and mortar now, aka omni-channel partners, Walmarts, CVS's, the Myers, the HEBs, the Targets. All of these retailers have gone into the click and collect world in some capacity. Some are better, some are learning, some are early in their journey. Let's take the great Walmart. You go back to January, Walmart Plus, none of us could have predicted it, but Walmart's clearly in the omni-channel trajectory in a very positive way. The good news for you as a CPG brand with Walmart is your product's already in store, and click and collect is the way of the future. Walmart's fulfilling it for you. You're under a temporary illusion now, life's pretty. All I got to do is some supply chain management. But every time Walmart picks the product off the shelf, that's a capital expense they're incurring for the picking and putting into a bag of some sort to satisfy. There's a fee coming for that. And you'd be silly to think there's no fee coming and life's all good. But that fee is going to be inherently smaller than the fee that it'll take to start D2C. Or if you're starting a business on a pure play retailer that you've never done business with before. So that's where you start and hunt, because it's just infinitely easier. Your product's already in the retailer warehouse. You're not creating a new ecosystem and truckloads are dropping product off. There's no new vendor penalties on your trade rates. But that'll only get you so far. To me, it's very clear. If you want to be successful in retailing 2025 as a CPG brand, the journey passes obviously through your click and collect. We've already discussed it. You've got to know how to sell 3P on Amazon. Mark my words, 3P. I didn't say 1P. And D2C. They have different roles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with all of that. I think there's kind of a theme here as well, which is that I've always believed that to be successful in this industry of e-commerce, you really need to be a futurist. I mean, that maybe, like, I don't mean like talking about flying cars and stuff, 50 years from now, but you have to be thinking.
Apparently, they're flying drones in Fayetteville.
Well, yeah. I mean, so that's real, right? Like, I mean, we're 5 years away from probably significant changes in robotics with last mile delivery. I mean, you really genuinely have to be considering 2 to 3, 5 years out, kind of where the puck is going. Because if you're not, especially as a larger organization, if you're not building, looking kind of at future state of commerce, you're always going to be behind. And this stuff happens. I think one thing that people have to admit is you should be in a position where you're continually surprised at how quickly some of this stuff happens.
I think, John, if there's one big takeaway and you didn't like everything else we discussed here, be future focused. You kind of nailed that, right? The one big teaching we've had is if you go back to your strap plans and the amazing AOPs, and I've been part of this 20 years for a living, 20 plus years. You go back to January and you dusted your AOP and say, how's my Q1 going to be? And you had a certain dollar sales goal. The simple question I ask you is, how did that work out for you? But if you were futuristic, you were able to twist and turn very quickly within 60 days. And you were able to rebuild your AOP for the balance of the year. And most large brands aren't inherently, the DNA doesn't exist, the structure doesn't exist to operate that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. Shri, how do people, connect with you, follow you, find out more about kind of what you're up to, the product?
Straightforward, John, on our product. Just check out our products at zenfuel.com. That's www.zenfuel.com, Zenfuel. You can find us on Amazon for sure. And you can just go type Zenfuel. The brand store will be up. November 16th, I'm waiting for the final brand registry approval to come through. And if you want to find me, just look me up on LinkedIn, Shri Rajagopalan. I'm sure you'll find me. And I'm also running a podcast with my friend Peter Bond, my lifelong friend from my IRA days in the mid 1990s. And our podcast is called the CPG Guys, on which, John, you've been kind enough to come feature and talk about being successful on Amazon, which is so different than the brick and mortar world. So the goal here, John, is continue to help the smaller brands be able to compete and deliver quality products at value for the consumer.
I love it. I think that's a great place to wrap up. Shri, thanks so much for being on.
John, thank you so much for having me. Hopefully we'll be doing a lot of these back and forth on the CPG Guys, as well as here on the Orca Pacific ecosystem of not just the podcast, but also as we begin to partner more and more in the future on just making elite brands successful in the digital journey.
I look forward to it. There's no shortage of topics, so I think we could do this every 2 days if we wanted to. So, all right, Shri, appreciate it.
Thank you.